The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon. This is Marcy Clamp with Gemalto, part of the North America team, and we're pleased to present this global, worldwide new presentation on building new models with the IoT, the Internet of Things. Our presenters today, let me just move this slide, our keynote speaker is Ray Wang. He's the principal analyst and founder of Constellation Research and an amazing presenter with a very real insight on what's going on in the industry. Followed, another one of our presenters will be Dave Madden. He's a senior director with Gemalto in the IoT business development for our enterprise and cybersecurity group. Todd Steele is presenting as well. We have him presenting as our director of product management in software monetization. And our last presenter will be the first, but last on this slide, is Oleg Pachkovets. He's the Director of Technical Sales and for the IoT M2M division, also of Gemalto. So without further ado, let me turn this presentation over to Ray. And please, Ray, the mic and the audience is all yours.
Hey, thanks a lot, Marcy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're going to start talking about new IoT business models. And I think it's really important to start by thinking about IoT much more than just the technologies, the sensors, all the infrastructure that's required to make something happen. So let's start with the next slide. And we're going to talk about one of the interesting things that we see in these stats, especially what's happening across the board in areas like digital transformation. So the first thing to think about is digital business models are out here. And what's really important to understand is that it doesn't matter. Think about the segment you're in. The number one, the number two, the number three players are taking anywhere from 40 to 70% of the total market share and 40 to 77% of the profits. And this is happening because they're building business models that are digital-based on areas such as the Internet of Things. So on the next slide, you'll see what this is really about. So at the end of the day, what we're talking about here is the ability to go to a post-sale, on-demand attention economy. What I mean by post-sale is everything after the sale now is more valuable than the initial sale of a product. And in some cases, we're going from a product to a service to an insight to an experience, and an experience to an outcome. The second thing that's happening is on-demand. And what we're talking about here is we're not buying a product in full or an offering in full. We're actually coming back to accessing smaller and smaller chunks of these products, services, insights, experiences, and outcomes. And then the last piece, which is really important, is if I'm not saving your time or capturing your attention, you're not interested. And that's the attention economy. So going to the next slide, you'll see that this is part of that shift in terms of where we are moving. So as we wait for the next slide to load, you'll see that there are new business models and digital transformation moving on board. And so on slide 7, you'll see a set of statistics. And these stats kind of talk about where we are today. So on the next slide, in slide 7, we got a couple of rules that are happening. We got a set of statistics that are happening here. So digital transformation, as you can tell, is top of mind with CXOs for 2017. Now, what's happening? Well, if you think about it, 61% of the Global 2000, they're engaged in digital transformation. In fact, this is one of the top boardroom issues. So whether it's IoT, whether it's building new business models, whether it's trying to enable a piece of digitalization inside an organization, that is one of the top boardroom issues. As a result, 73% of CXOs that we've surveyed, they are looking to increase their 2017 budgets and even in planning for 2018. Now, the trick here is 87% of these projects have a data component. You got to have data in place in order to make these projects successful. And we see that across the board, that this data is the key to building the future business models ahead that are built on having insights, that are built on transforming experiences. Now, the last stat here is interesting because 37% of projects today are being led by chief digital officers. And these chief digital officers are sometimes playing the role of a CTO, sometimes have P&L responsibilities, sometimes come from the IT side, sometimes come from the business side. We're going to see more and more CDOs, but the interesting thing to note is that by 2025, we believe there won't be any more chief digital officers. In fact, we think there will be digitally enabled CXOs, finance people that understand how to build business models to support these new digital initiatives, IT folks that understand what agility is required to deliver on these new business models, CMOs and product folks that actually build offerings, understanding the constraints and the opportunities with technology. And of course, you might have HR people that know how to hire for these digital artisans. Now, the second rule on the next slide tells us what is happening. And this is the data piece. Data is this foundation. Every connection, every click, every conversation, every feed, every data set that comes back from, any kind of log file, all of that information is part of this digital business. And this is very, very relevant in terms of the digital exhaust, much more than people realize. So let's look at the next slide, which shares with us what's happening in terms of the data that's out there. Now, we know there's a massive explosion of data content that is happening. Now, the stats here are important. You can read these on your own. Note that there's 80 billion sensors in devices by 2020. Note that there's massive amounts of connections per minute. But the one that you have to understand is that 60% of this mission critical data is going to sit outside your four walls. In fact, they're going to sit outside your four walls from sensors or from IoT networks. They're going to sit outside your four walls because you're going to access information from other sources. And that's a very important critical piece of what we're talking about, because data access, not ownership, is one of the foundations of what's happening, and especially when we look at IoT. Now, when we look at the next slide, what we're talking about here is really this data to decisions paradigm. We start with these data sources. They're structured, they're semi-structured, they're unstructured. The main point here is these data sources are being captured, they're being brought together, and they're organized around information. Once we organize that around information, which typically flows with business processes such as procure to pay, incident to resolution, order to cash, right, hire to retire. Each one of these business processes allow us to actually then take that information, convert that into patterns. As we identify those patterns, understand what's happening so that we can take the next best action. We can make decisions. And this is what we call a data to decisions pipeline. Now, once that happens, we secure this, and we bring it back into the data sources, we learn from it, and we build out this. So the whole point of all this data is ultimately to get better context so that we can improve analytical insight to make better decisions. So moving to the next slide, and for those following on slide 12, you'll realize that if you don't have 20% of your revenue as an insight stream by 2020, you don't have a digital business model. You can't support an IoT business model. And so we'll explain a little bit about these three paradigms on slide 13. We'll talk about the three paradigms that are there in terms of new big data business models. The first one is what we call insight-based differentiation. And that's when you take just a little bit of information to transform experiences, create new service offerings, drive demand, drive down lower cost models, improve customer satisfaction. So how many of you out there use Waze or Google Maps? Now think about this. Just a little bit of information changes and transforms the way you look at traffic and traffic patterns. And that's what we're talking about, just having a little bit of insight to transform that experience. The second piece becomes interesting, insight brokering. Insight brokering, we take the raw information. How much water did you use? How much power did you consume? What's happening inside your organization? How many widgets did you process? Right? How many patents did you file? Whatever raw information is being captured, right? What's happening from the sensors? What are the log files? What's your uptime? That information, that raw information is being sold. It's being shared. It's being analyzed. Those insights are being sold to other people. The benchmarking against that is happening. And that insight brokering is the second type of business model that is coming from this type of insight. Now, the third part is kind of interesting, insight-based business platforms. These are platforms that are taking all types of information, aggregating them, putting it into marketplaces. They're being used to create new deals. They're being used, of course, in advertising networks. A great example of this is if you were given the task to figure out how much would a 10 by 10 booth in Times Square go for on New Year's Eve, you'd be like, Ray, that's a crazy question. How do you answer that? And I would say, look, these new marketplaces are popping up. Actually, ad networks work in the same way. I can tell by Zillow data, I can tell by POS information, I can tell by satellite imagery, heat maps, what an approximate cost of rent would be. So 7 to 9 might be $1,000 an hour. 9 to 11 might be 5,000. 11 to 1 might be 7,500. 1 to about 5 p.m. might be 10,000. 5 to 7, there's a little lull, so it goes back to 7,500. 7 to 9 on New Year's Eve will be 20,000. 9 to midnight will be 30,000. We can create brand new models by doing that. So let's go to the next slide, and I can show you an example that many of you guys probably have experienced. And this shows you what happens when we move to new business models. So next slide. So on slide 14, what you see here is our favorite UPS and FedEx folks. Now, many of you probably experienced this. It's in the afternoon. These guys never show up if you're residential until the afternoon. I don't know why. It must be some kind of protocol. But here's the deal. You're at home. You have to run out. You think the guy comes between 3 and 4. You leave to go do something, run an errand, pick up your kids, and boom, you get that little ticket. It says, hey, sorry, we missed you. And you're like, darn. Now, but imagine if I could take that barcode, scan it on my phone, find the driver where my package is on, track that driver down, run over to that individual, and maybe pay an additional fee to go collect my package. How many of you would do that for $10? You're thinking, that's kind of interesting. All right, how many would do it for $10 if it was shoes? Okay, probably got a bunch more of you. But you see what I'm saying? You already paid for shipping, right? In many cases, it was free. You were willing to spend an additional amount of money to get your package earlier. That is awesome, right? We have actually created a way to jumpstart growth using an IoT approach. Now, think about this, the ability to track that down. Now, if you probably think it's a little dangerous for people to run after your drivers, that is true. Actually, someone at UPS told this to me before when we actually used this as an example. But what they can do now for an extra fee or even for free sometimes is have it diverted to a UPS store for pickup, have it sent to a locker somewhere if you want, or reroute the package to a different address. Using just a little bit of insight, just a little bit of context, you can easily create a new revenue stream. And that's what this is all about. All right, so let's move to the next slide. So what have we learned over this period of time? Well, let's go to slide 16 and we'll share with you some of the learnings and findings. So we have to start by saying in IoT, how do we build new business models? That is the crux of what we're trying to do, right? It's much, much more deeper than the technology slide that you're going to see on the next slide, which is really about what's going on, like the stacks and, because when we talk about IoT, we often talk about here's the devices, here are the sensors, here are the connections, right? And then here are stacks, and here are networks and platforms, well, and brokerages and ecosystems. Those are all important, but without the business model, who cares? And that's what we're talking about here. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll share with you an example of possible business models. So one that we all know about is, hey, look, I can turn these lights on and off. I can connect to something. I can see a camera. That's a classic IoT business model. Another one is in field service and management, remote service and support. The ability to go out there and say, monitor things. And that happens all the time. If you're checking into a hotel, right, you see these monitoring folks that are actually monitoring the internet. They're making sure that they, tech support inside a hotel. Not everybody wants a CIO for every hotel, so they remotely monitor this in any country outside the country you're in to say, hey, look, we've diagnosed the problem. We fixed the network. So there's remote service opportunities. There's also cross-sell and upsell. And these opportunities pop up. They give you the ability to think about, hey, what are related items that you should be purchasing, related offerings, service, and insights. And also, the IoT business models are providing market intelligence. Think about what happens in Uber. Like every drive, every ride, every route, all that information is being sold, brokered. It turns out that going from point A to point B, I'm actually in London at this moment, so let's say I'm going from Mayfair to, Piccadilly. That seems to be a popular route. Okay, so maybe we change the pricing. Maybe we add more drivers. Maybe we incentivize more folks to be in the local area between the hours of 7 to 9 because we have the context. And then ultimately, we've got a bunch of insight economies that occur. But let's go deeper. Let me give you another example. So on the next slide, you're going to see the showerhead, and this is not the company I'm talking about, but I'm going to give you an example of a company that said, hey, look, we're going to put a sensor on a shower for $1 per showerhead per month, right? So we heard the story, and the first time we heard this, we just said, that is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. But it actually turned out to be much more interesting than that. So it turns out that in hotels, if you are, and can we move back to the same, stay on the slide 19? It turns out that when we actually understand the business model that's going on here, what's interesting is that Net Promoter Score, that indicator of customer satisfaction, 4 out of the top 10 attributes are related to the shower. It's too hot, it's too cold, the water pressure stinks, it's leaking. And if you can improve NPS by 1 point, you can drive revenue anywhere from 10 to 18%. That is a huge number. So if you got 200 hotel rooms for $200 a month, I'm telling you, I can drive revenue up 10 to 15%. You'd want to be able to do that, and that is pretty cool. But there's also something interesting. You could give away that monitoring for free if you were up, if you were trying to prove a point. Say, hey, we'll monitor everything for free. Why don't you give me your service contract? We'll keep the exact same terms. We'll take care of all the service, but give me a 3-year service contract, and I will take over your shower and give you free monitoring and drive your revenue up 10 to 15%. Now, that's a no-brainer. Most people would do that. Now, what happens after 3 years? After 3 years, 4 years, you have the data on all the shower heads. You know why a shower head breaks. You know why your competitor's shower head breaks. You know exactly what parts break, when, where, and why. And more importantly, when you can do that, can we stay on the other slide? More importantly, when you do that, you now have the ability to figure out your supply chains, figure out how to manufacture against that, and in 3 to 4 years, you will have replaced anywhere from 30 to 40% of all the parts of your competitors. But wait, there's another business model. Now you've got a problem. You've got the service contract. How are you going to service all these shower heads? You're going to create an Uber-like plumber network, of course, right? So you're going to take the service contract. You're going to train all these folks to switch out shower heads. You're going to certify them. They're going to come out. And when there's a job, they're going to jump in. And you've got the service contracts to deliver a job. And more importantly, at night, you could create demand-based pricing. At 7 p.m., it could be $50. At 10 p.m., it might be $300. And at 3 a.m., it could be $500 an hour for a service call. This is what we're talking about. But wait, there's more. I've got 2 more business models for you. And in fact, these are very interesting. How many of you folks steam your clothes in the shower? Ooh, that is pretty bad. Think about this. You are wasting tons of water, but hey, it's so much easier than trying to find the iron, set it up, and try to iron this thing. So if I can incentivize you to spend less time in the shower, use less water, I can create a green efficiency program. And guess here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to give you 500 more hotel points if you keep your shower to 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 100 if you keep it to 10. I'm going to give you nothing if you go over 10 minutes. I have now created a green efficiency program and a customer loyalty program all in one. Let's go to the next slide. You saw the sneak peek. You have 5 business models in one on a stupid shower head which has an internet sensor that is being charged for $1 a shower head per month. And it turns out it's not very stupid. It is brilliant. You have customer experience service monitoring. You've got a data play on field service. You've got an Uber-type plumbing network. You've got a green efficiency play, and you have a loyalty program. Next slide, please. So as we look at the next slide, what do we really want to do? We're taking that data, we're taking that information, we're taking those insights, and we're ultimately getting this contextual relevancy. We've got the ability to actually figure out what we are going to do in terms of starting out with perception, understanding what's going on, getting an alert or task to say, hey, look, the shower head is leaking, ultimately getting a suggestion or recommendation, because over time we learn that it's leaking for these 7 reasons, and we provide that, and we expedite the ability to repair something, and then ultimately we automate that process and say, hey, look, we got a leaky valve, we know exactly what it is, these are the 28 repair folks we know that can take care of it, and we automate it. And in fact, we can predict, we can get to the point that says, we know this shower head in room 401 is going down in 3 days. Can we send someone out there earlier? And more importantly, we can even prevent something from happening, like a catastrophe, especially that your pipes are going to break, something's going to leak, and ultimately we're going to get to situational awareness. We want this information so that we can get to better decisions. We want this information so that we can improve relevancy through artificial intelligence. All this data, all this information in IoT ultimately is powering your ability to be more competitive, to identify ways to deliver better service, identify the demand signals on a supply chain, to prevent a failure, improve customer loyalty. You see where I'm going. So let's look at the next slide. So what we're seeing here is the dawn of the ability to deliver on AI-driven smart services. IoT starts by providing that context. And you are seeing this is the model for every single IoT smart service, even customer journeys, blockchains, work streams. The point is we start with just a little bit of information. That information allows us, and that footprint exhaust allows us to create a set of immersive experiences. I'm going to use another example. Imagine, you're at a skyscraper, you work on the 20th floor, you walk into the building using a 27-point facial analysis. It says, hey, that looks like Ray. Using a gait analysis, it looks like my walk. It says, oh, that's definitely Ray. I haven't swiped my badge in, and it says, send elevators down. There's someone that's about to go to the 20th floor. In fact, it says that because there are 50 people in the lobby that are all trying to go to the 20th floor, or different floors. They all need to go up. So you send elevators down. So using a little bit of context, time, location, weather, right, understanding a role and identity, I know I can take that. I now provide content to say, hey, would you like to go to the 20th floor? We then sense and respond, and then we deliver on different channels. So I walk into the elevator, right? On my phone it says, would you like to go to the 20th floor? On the screen it says, would you like to go to the 20th floor? That's kind of cool. However, a bunch of other things start to happen. We have anticipatory analytics. It pops up and it guesses and says, hey, Ray, there are 3 other options you might not have considered. Yeah, you want to go to the 20th floor, that's option 1. But option 2 is your boss, she's on the 25th floor. She's got 15 minutes. You've been trying to reach her for the last 5 weeks. She's got a 15-minute window. Would you like to visit her boss? There's an 80% chance I might take that offer. So option 2 pops up. And then option 3 pops up and it says, Ray, wait, there are donuts on the 5th floor. Oh my God, what do? Do I go for the donuts? Do I meet with my boss, or do I just go to my floor? You see, personalization at scale happens through anticipatory analytics, catalysts like offers, and a set of choices that I make. And more importantly, there's a value exchange. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's a meeting, which is consensus. Sometimes it's non-monetary because I helped someone else, I gave them a like, I shared with them something. And then over time, I learned this cadence, which is step 5. And I figured, does it happen every morning? Does it happen in a dependent action? And I learned that in the machine learning side. And over time, this is how we deliver on these business models at scale for IoT. So let's take a look at the next slide. So how do we get here? Well, it's going to require you to think about these business models, right? Lots of people talk about bi-modal, different speeds. Here's the reality. There's a multimodal approach to be successful. If you take the multimodal, you will win. There's a team that you have out there that does sustaining operations. These folks are awesome. These folks keep the chains running on time. They do things, and you want to make sure you take away all the friction to make their jobs better. That's taking the data, that's making insights available, that's removing barriers and, politics, everything. There's a team that does incremental innovation. They came from the sustaining ops team, and these folks are awesome. They make things faster, better, cheaper, and they know how to do it. They get 10 to 15% improvements. These folks are great too. They work well sustaining ops. But then we have these folks that are building new business models. And you know who they are. These folks don't color within the lines. These folks think outside of the box. They're doing transformational innovation. And in fact, the sustaining ops team and the incremental innovation folks hate them because they don't follow the rules. But wait, we need them to break the rules and build new business models because we're doing something different here. And so we know in order to succeed, you need a good set of culture to actually bring these teams together. You need governance to share best practices, share what's happening, and more importantly, you need a plan to get from concept to commercialization. And if you put that in place, you're starting to have a place to get there in terms of making these business models work in IoT. So one other thing on the next slide, on slide 24. Successful IoT business models require a couple things. We know we need a lot of innovation, we need all this stuff, but there are 3 elements. You have to connect. This is about connecting things and objects back. You have to secure. You have to keep this secure because that's a lot of information data sitting on the edges. And more importantly, you don't have a business model unless you monetize. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to the next speaker.
All right. Thank you, Ray. This was impressive. And this is indeed actually what Gemalto has defined as essential points, essential 3 pillars of IoT is the connect, secure, and monetize. So I mean by connect, we're saying there's a device on the edge that collects the data from the real environment. And this device needs to be connected through the internet to a server and to generate and provide this data. And for that reason, Gemalto offers connectivity modules, then connectivity management platforms, and the SIM cards. So the next pillar is to secure the connection. The data need to be secured, right? with Gemalto proven record of securing government, banking, and cellular authentication, we offer a perfect fit to drive the secure IoT evolution. And last but not least, of course, you need to generate business. As Ray has indicated, this is essential, and this can be generated easily if you have connected things, if you have data. However, for that, you do need tools, you do need services to be able to build up and to offer those business models. So now the next slide, please. So let's stay with the connectivity pillar. And there are some essential components that that are needed to connect an IoT device to the internet. As Ray has mentioned, for instance, a showerhead that needs, let's say, rugged industrial grade communication module to send the data to be on in the environment. It also needs a rugged industrial SIM card. Both are offered by Gemalto. And then taking a closer look at the appliance, like for instance, construction machine, vending machine, power meter, or any other IT device, they all have three functions mainly. So they're basically collecting the data from the environment, and this can be operation hours, this can be battery status, this can be temperature, or another interesting use case. So as you might know, this construction machines, they're usually being leased, and in terms of theft protection, it will be useful to put like a geo fence around this machine. And if this machine is like leaving this geo fence, there will be a notification because the device, the connected machine, collects the GPS coordinates where it stays. So then the second function of this connected device will be processing data. This is tons of data that is being generated by the sensors, and the devices basically needs to filter this data and to reduce the amount of this data. Then the device needs to validate this data and of course to encrypt this data to securely send it to the cloud, which is the third functionality of the device. So then while collecting the data, will not have any big difference compared to how it was done before, like for the last 20 years probably. So it's just physical data, and you need to collect it. Well, the sending the data to the network, it's changing drastically, and this is by introduction of this low power communication standard that we're currently experiencing a paradigm change in the connectivity of the IoT devices. And this new low power standard brings significant improvement in how device communicate, and even more improvement in power consumption of the device. Yeah, so, and already today communication modules, they offer the products like CAT-M and narrowband IoT that support this new era of communication technology. And now, however, to be able to utilize all this low power technology, those devices, the behavior of the devices need to be redefined. If before we have built the devices, we have defined the connectivity in a more generic way, in a more generic manner, now the behavior of the device will need to be aligned with the use case more closely. So the questions need to be answered. What happens when the device is not transmitting data? Does it stay connected to the internet or to the network or not? And how to control the amount of data being sent to the network, because every byte counts. It's costs and the energy we want to save. And then, for example, to save the power of a connected appliance, the tracking of a construction machine doesn't have to be permanent. The sensors on the machine will be monitoring the behavior of the machine, and if the machine is moving, or if the value reached critical stage, or if there's just time schedule where this data needs to be transmitted, right? And during all remaining time, this connected device, it does not need to be connected. It can be in a very low power mode, which is now possible. And so to summarize that, the entire idea of the new IT era is about low optimized power consumption, less data transmission, more efficiency, and probably the most important, security. And the security becomes indispensable in an IT solution. And by saying that, I would like to hand over to my colleague Dave, who will introduce what can be done to secure the IT connection.
Thank you, Oleg. And to your point, when we've seen studies from customers deploying and looking to deploy IoT-based services, the number one concern is security. And our friends at Gartner have validated this concern because they see over 25% of cyber attacks will be against IoT-based systems by 2020, the year 2020. So getting this right up front is critical. And one of the things that Gemalto have been doing for the past 20 years is building secure infrastructures for many different industries, from government to healthcare to finance, retail, manufacturing, smart grids, and of course M2M, machine-to-machine systems. And so what we look at, is dealing with data when it starts, as Oleg just described, at the device through sensors, and managing that data through its life cycle, because it's going to flow from a security perspective from the device to some sort of gateway into a cloud, and then into a back-end data where it's going to be used, analyzed, data analytics, artificial intelligence, as Ray was describing, will be formed on that data. So what we look at is building trust hierarchies and really building security in from the ground up. Both the Department of Homeland Security and NIST have come up with security frameworks for IoT in November of 2016. And those frameworks are really designed as best practices, guidances for industry to make sure as they're looking at IoT, they're addressing security and building it into the systems. And their number one recommendation is to build security in from the ground up. Don't do it as a bolt-on or an afterthought. And that's certainly what Gemalto have seen with our deployments over the past 20 years around the world. So when you look at this model, these 9 things on this slide, you really see when you're dealing with trust, and this example is really setting up a set of roots of trust for connected automobiles. And this could be energy, this could be smartwatches, this could be connected shower heads, as Ray was describing earlier. Any of these devices, this is really a set of best practices that Gemalto have been involved in industry that the IoT systems can really leverage. So start off with number 1, where you have some sort of infrastructure, typically public key based, for IoT device, and not just the device. As Ray mentioned, IT is much broader than a sensor in a device. It's really involving the application and the user as well. So set up, and the service provider. So set up those infrastructures up front. Then issue those identities to the IoT-based chips, leveraging sensors, devices, applications, users, so that you've got a framework for the network to then communicate and sign code and load code securely to those devices in steps 3 and 4. So once everything's been deployed in the field, authenticated, comes live, turns on, if you will, and make sure it's established correctly and has the correct code that doesn't have the ability to be set up in a Miri type botnet attack, because you've got these devices securely managed and controlled. Then you can deal with secure communications where that data, that powerful data that IoT is going to generate, can now move through the system in a secure manner. And of course, number 6, you're really dealing with IoT data at rest for users, devices, applications across the network, where you want to encrypt that sensitive data. And as you're dealing with the the more advanced use cases that Ray described for IoT, your data is really the lifeblood of the company and the value of your service. As you're leveraging that and potentially providing it with your ecosystem of partners to sell that data over time, that data is going to be gold, if you will, or some people call data being the new oil for IoT and digital systems. So obviously you've got to figure out ways to protect it, encrypt it, to make sure that it can't be stolen, just like intellectual property is today. course, number 7, you want to deal with, managing your data centers, encrypting that data between data centers, making sure it can't be hacked in those ways that we've seen in large financial and government systems around the world that are deployed with secure ways to communicate effectively for data resiliency and availability between data centers. And then ultimately, in steps 8 and 9, you want to deal with payments. And of course, once you've provided new capabilities and features, you want to be able to pay for those things in a secure way and deal with making sure that you're protecting the sensitive information from your customers, complying with regulations like GDPR that's going to be critical for companies all around the world to make sure that they protect sensitive customer information and privacy. So with that said, Gemalto are really a core elements of IoT systems. We can help in all of these areas. We've been building these systems for literally thousands of customers around the world, and we can be your trusted provider. Now let's talk about with my colleague Todd Steele to share more details on how you can take advantage of the value of the IoT data and the devices through the Gemalto's monetization products. Todd, I'll hand it over to you now.
Sure, thanks, Dave. My name is Todd Steele. I'm part of our software monetization group, which focuses on helping our customers, our device manufacturers, our device vendors produce and make this digital transformation that Ray talked about earlier on, from selling an endpoint device or machine to having a fully realized IoT business opportunity. So we see this transformation, this digital transformation, over kind of 5 typically key areas in our when we work with our customers. Starting on the bottom left, we see customers today, we see vendors today who are building machines, really selling in a very perpetual model, right? Typically, the perpetual sale of a device is a one-time, I'm done, and when I want to introduce a new set of functionality features, I want to introduce a new model of hardware and hope my customer base gets rid of the old one and replaces it with the new one. This is how I increase my transaction value from my customer base. But what we really see with the result of IoT happening in the device world is this shift from selling a specific perpetual one-time device deal to moving to a recurring based software value type focused sale, where you want to have recurring business models, you want to have a subscription business model, maybe you want to have a transactional consumption-based business model like a cell phone. How many times did you use the device in a day, and that's what I'm going to charge you at the end of the month. So we see this shift from moving from a perpetual type of business model to a software-centric type of business model where it's a recurring consumption-based business model. From this software-based business model, what it allows a device manufacturer, device vendor to do is, they're building up their software teams internally, and traditionally the route to return on the investment in terms of your IP of delivering software in this perpetual, model-centric view of delivering software in a perpetual sale, your return on that investment is a very lengthy period of time, because you build the new software, you build the new firmware and features and functionality, you deliver it to the market, and then you start working on the next one, and then a few years later you introduce the next model, and only after those few years you realize the return on your software investment. Well, in this software-centric type of business models that are being adopted in the IoT, or as a result of the IoT and connected devices, what we see is that these customers can move from this ability to introduce new features immediately to the field once they're done by their software development team. It's a connected device. They send out the feature. In fact, they send out a trial, a 30-day trial, a 5 uses trial, this type of trial to get customers to adopt the technology and pay for the upgrade immediately from the device that's already deployed, really accelerating that return on investment in software. So we see these as all the benefits of moving from this perpetual sale to this software-centric subscription-based model. Then what we see customers doing, though, is introducing new revenue sources by introducing services, software-based cloud-delivered services around the device that also adds value to the customer who's using the device. So this introduces a new set of monetization challenges. What did you purchase? How often can you access the data? How much data do you have? How easily can you access this data? So these new revenue sources create new business model opportunities, but also the challenges of how do I manage my customer who's buying hardware products, buying feature sets of software, buying cloud-delivered services, all being delivered operationally differently, and how do I know what the customer has bought over time from all of these pieces over the length of the customer, right? Not just in the first month that they do a financial transaction, but maybe financial transactions over a great period of time. Then what we see the inclination for is extending beyond just selling services and deriving value from the software that's in the device, but taking the data of this connected device, and Ray talked a lot about this in the transformation of that showerhead model, but really creating a revenue source or a revenue stream just from packaging and selling the data. In the shower example he used this municipalities, being able to take this data and maybe go to the municipalities and say, hey, listen, I can gauge and anticipate water demand over time. And this in and of itself becomes a business. You have a product manager, you have a software team, you have this data you want to sell. So how do you do that? How do you package that data? How do you deliver that data? How do you make sure that data isn't copied and misused? These are all problems and challenges that we in software monetization help our clients with. And then lastly, in very successful IoT environments, usually it isn't just the vendor who's producing the piece of equipment delivering value or delivering software to that piece. In fact, what we see is the really successful IoT or the really popular IoT devices are being opened as platforms that allow third parties to come in and introduce software, really further extending the value to the end consumer of that. Well, when this software is being sold and delivered to this equipment, well, the vendor of that hardware wants to be part of that chain. They want to be part of the authorization that, yes, you're allowed to run this specific software. I've guaranteed it doesn't introduce problems to the safety, the configuration of the device, etc. So once you open up this ecosystem and allow third party to start introducing software value to your device, then again, it raises another question of how do you monetize it? How do you monetize your partners? How do you authorize them? How do you allow software to get on this device and really control what this device can and can't do? So these are the challenge, and this is the evolution that we in Gemalto are helping our clients go through as they adopt new different business models to capture the new revenue streams available to them in the IoT. On the next slide, I will talk just a little bit about, in more detail, what exactly that is. So in software monetization, we're providing tools and technology to really help our clients with protecting their IP so that that IP that is delivered to device can't be reverse engineered, can't be modified for safety concerns, etc. We provide secure licensing technologies that allow really holding customers to the contracts and hold them in compliance to the contracts that they've purchased. How many users, how many times, maybe even the technology stack doesn't actually hold or bar use by once you've bought a 1,000-seat license and now user 1001 comes along, maybe you don't want to actually stop that. Maybe you just want to notify, hey, create a new sales opportunity to extend the value of your system to that customer. So we provide infrastructure for that. We provide the infrastructure to really adopt any type of different business model. The software world made this transition to recurring-based, on-demand type consumption of software many decade or two ago, and now the hardware world is finally catching up. So our technology and tools that we've provided for those software vendors over the years are exactly the same mature technology we provide to help vendors make the same type of transition. We provide lifecycle management that helps you better understand who's purchasing what, sort of an ERP of software, selling software, when did you deliver it, do you have the receipt so you can financially say, yes, I've guaranteed delivery of this, I can recognize the revenue. These are the type of tools from creating what type of packaging to the operation, automating the operational and fulfillment aspects of software. We have tools for that. Our software monetization tools also provide a platform to capture product or usage insight into how customers are using, what features are they using, how often are they using them, by whom, what is your aggregated set of customers across the globe, how are they using your products. Those drive better decisions and business decisions internally. We provide that. And lastly, one of the most important pieces of one of the aspects that Ray had mentioned earlier is this on-demand customer-centric model. So the way that people want to consume software is important as what the software does itself. This customer experience really is on the forefront of driving it, and we realize that how you interact with the delivery of your software rights, what you're able to, how do you move those software rights, how do you delineate, how do you understand what you've purchased, what you've used, how often you're using it. This type of insight and this type of customer self-service really is in and of itself a competitive advantage when devices go to market, adopting this kind of recurring on-demand type of consumption models that is being expected in the market today. This is what we're offering and helping our clients with in Gemalto Software Monetization Group. On the next slide, we'll just kind of summarize really what we see at Gemalto. We really see our technology stacks across many different areas of focus, but really providing a very cornerstone foundational piece of what you need to be successful in the IoT. We're providing, you know, the hardware to really connect your device, to gain access to the networks and to facilitate the secure communication required. We're providing the lifecycle management of those devices to update what is on there, what's the firmware, what's the applications on those devices. We're providing application security. We're providing, you know, trust of the key security elements that you're putting in the device to make it unique, to have secure authentication, to make sure that it's allowed on networks and can communicate. And we're providing you the tools and technology to provide you a way to monetize your software, a platform, so that you don't have to build it yourself, that you can come to a technology partner who's helped customers make this transition from a hardware type of sale to a perpetual recurring subscription based models that are expected in this on-demand type of consumption marketplace today. So I think that's our presentation, and I think for the next moments we're gonna take a moment to see if there's any questions that were submitted through the WebEx platform, and we'll answer them one by one.
Yep.
You want to facilitate that?
Yes, thank you. I was on the edge of my seat, and I apologize if my finger was too quick or too slow. It was a critical job of slide moving, and I think I let a few of you down, especially Ray. But it was an amazing presentation. I think we have all learned a lot about the new business models from Ray, the connectivity issues in IoT from Oleg, security concerns that are, you know, very important in IoT from Dave, and then the monetize issues that, or the development process and the life cycle that Todd walked us through. So I do have a couple of questions. We'll start with Ray. Let's see. I think it's Ray, maybe Dave. What do organizations most misunderstand about IoT today? Maybe it could be any of you. So if any of you want to answer, that's fine.
I'll hop in.
Okay.
I think a lot of folks think IoT is just this thing about machines being connected, and it's about a set of technologies. And what people don't realize is that it's really the beginning of the digitization of analog products. Right, and I'll give an example. Like, we had a company that came to us at a conference a few weeks ago, and they're in the toaster business. And they said, you know, how do we make IoT work for toasters? And we said, that's actually pretty simple. Today, when you buy a toaster, you don't buy it from the company, you buy it at a retail outlet. And the only time you actually call the manufacturer is when you have a problem. And that's kind of bad, because the only time your first interaction with the brand is actually when you have a problem, like it doesn't work, it's, you know, I'm filling out a warranty card. But you could change it if you actually had an IoT-enabled device. So let's say you have a blender, or you have a toaster, and you enable a brand new feature to be software-driven by being connected to the internet. So if you register, we're going to give you an upgrade. We're going to give you an upgrade on your toaster or your blender or your mixer right off the bat. And it's stuff like that that actually starts changing people's views on what they can do and create new business models. So we shift from being in products to the services business. And I think that's one of the biggest things people forget, that IoT is a business. Doing IoT right means you actually took a business model and said, I'm going to apply a technology like IoT to solve the solution and create a brand new experience, a new service, or a new offering. And that's the big thing people forget.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Anybody else want to chip in?
Yeah, I'd like to chip in.
I think real quick.
Oh,
Okay.
We're both excited, Dave.
All right, Todd, go ahead.
Okay, I'll jump in real quick. I'll just say that as I kind of try to call out on my slides, I definitely see this misunderstanding of IoT. What does it mean? Oh, does it mean just moving to a subscription-based model or a software-based model? And I agree with Ray exactly that. No, it's absolutely not. What we see the most successful companies in the market doing is introducing new ways to do business and new value around the devices and machines they have today, which really increases their opportunity and their value that they can bring their customers, opening up new doors. And in this way, in this business model transformation, these are creating new markets that the exact same product with the exact same feature set can now fit into that they couldn't fit into before. So it's IoT really opens up the opportunities for additional revenue sources without actually having to increase the feature functionality of the machine itself. So I think that's one of the key things that I see. Over to you, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Well put, and not a lot of value to add beyond what Ray and Todd have just described, but certainly, focusing too much on the device, thinking that's the key point. What Todd and Ray really helped us recognize is that it's about changing the business model and leveraging the data for both better customer intimacy, better product efficiency, like predictive maintenance, but then new business streams. And the point here is, if you're not doing it, one of your competitors or a startup's going to be, and they're going to completely revolutionize your business model if you're not thinking about how to do this in the next couple of years. So I think that's probably a couple of the key things. It's as much as IoT is about the device and the technology, it's more about the business model and changing the way you do business.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Is there, let's see if there's anybody else that wants to pipe in. If not, let me go on to the next question. I think definitely this is for Ray. So Ray, does your model work for something other than shower heads?
That's a great question. Actually, it does, right? And the way we look at those models is, the first thing you have to think about is where new services will be created, where new insights can be gained, and what can we do with those new insights? Like, can we use that to reduce supply chain costs? Can we use that to offer new upgrades? So let's go back to the toaster example. Let's say, for example, you're buying toasters and you get different demographics. You might have one demographic that wants the most high-quality toaster, the best features. Their intention is to keep that toaster for the next 5 to 10 years. That's one group of people, and that operates very differently. Or you have a group, a segment that actually would prefer to have a new toaster every 3 years. And so you might actually have a program that says, hey, look, pay us, $4 a month, keep it on a subscription for the next 3 years or 4 years, and within the next 4 years, you can choose any 2 toasters you like. We'll swap out the old one or give you a new one, right? And that's how people start seeing how these models work. So that's one example. This works with jet engines, right? People are selling engines, and they used to sell these big engines for, I don't know, millions of dollars, and now what you end up buying is you're buying flight time, right? And so one part of making this model work is to think about the smallest unit cost of something you can sell. And when you can understand what that smallest unit cost is, you can then transform new types of business experiences. And so, for example, large power generating companies sell megawatts per hour. Imagine if you sold power by the electron. Is that a green electron? Is that a coal-fired electron? Is that a hydro electron? Is that nuclear? Is that peak? Is that non-peak? Right? Is that on the weekend? Is it? And all those questions then help you create brand new offerings for folks that want to buy 100% green, 80% green, 17% green. Doesn't matter. The point is you can deliver that.
Okay, wonderful. And I think one more, maybe for Oleg, and it may not be, maybe everyone can pipe in here, but I think it's more related to Oleg. Is designing the IoT is still very complex. There are many parts that need to be connected together. So how does Gemalto help resolve this complexity? Good question.
Well, absolutely. And this is what I see on a day-to-day basis consulting our customers, that there are so many moving parts in designing an IoT solution that partially people are confused or cannot see the big picture. And that's why what we're indicating here, it sounds very simple to creating a business model, but you need to know the environment. You need to know the surrounding. And what Gemalto does, we actually, since last year or 1.5 years, we built up significantly our consulting department to consult our customers around the North American and actually America's scope to explain how to build a solution. We are talking to the carriers, we are talking to the device manufacturer, to integrators, to pretty much all market player. Combine this information and give this information, bring this information to our customers and explain how they can generate value. So consulting in this case is the key. Okay.
And I guess we have one more question for Ray, and then we'll wrap up. And Ray, quickly, I guess if you could answer that, any other ideas you have for services that can be created in the IoT?
Oh, no, that's a great question. Other services built in IoT. So there are a couple things. Imagine large remote monitoring services that actually happen. So let's say you're trying to do building monitoring and maintenance, and you monitor large buildings. Think about smart cities, right? Public sector organizations that are trying to manage traffic signals, crowdsource potholes, try to figure out what's going on with traffic lights. Well, the ability to remote monitor all these capabilities means that organizations can come in and say, hey, look, we'll do remote monitoring and field service for organizations. And in fact, what they can end up doing is building up marketplaces. It'll be like an Uber-like network just for crowdsourcing public sector work. So it turns out that, having the network means that organizations can then find certified folks. Any certified folks can bid in on a job and say, hey, look, I'm going to fill this pothole. Right? I noticed that a traffic light's out. Oh, we'll replace that traffic light. We're certified to do this in any city, any state. And pretty soon you create a marketplace to not only improve the quality of service in terms of response times on an incident, but more importantly, drive down the cost of delivering those services by opening it up to more and more folks that can actually provide them. And that's really part of these types of new models. So remember, this is a business model first, and then the technologies are applied. And then, of course, you have to find a way to monetize and secure these once you've connected.
Mm-hmm. Thank you guys so much, especially Ray. I know that you are very busy. You're calling us from London, so it's late in your evening. But I appreciate everybody's participation and insight, and also our audience for attending today. If anybody has any other questions, I put my email address on the screen, and we'll be making this presentation available on a recorded link. So if you're interested in that, just drop me a quick email, and I'll make sure I get it to you. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.